Have you ever stopped to think about what it really means to be smart? I mean, really. For the longest time, the answer was shockingly simple. It was just a number. Today, we're going to unpack the incredible story of how that single number got completely shattered and how our whole definition of intelligence was reinvented from the ground up.
It seems like such a simple question, doesn't it? But wow, the search for an answer has sparked more than 100 years of debate, of discovery, and led to a total reinvention of what it even means to be intelligent in the first place.
For a long time, the answer was just one thing, a single number, an IQ of 100. That was the average, the gold standard. Your intelligence, well, it could be neatly summed up, scored, and compared. Simple as that.
But what if that single number was only telling a tiny fraction of the story? Let's dive in because we're about to explore how we went from one simple score to a whole universe of different kinds of human smarts.
Okay, so our story starts at the beginning of the 20th century, with this really powerful idea that intelligence was a single measurable thing.
You know what's so fascinating is where this all began. The very first intelligence test, it wasn't designed to go find the next Einstein. Nope. Back in 1905, two guys named Binet and Simon just wanted a way to identify kids in France who needed a little extra help in school. So they came up with this idea of a mental age. You know, the typical smarts for a certain age group. It was actually another guy, William Stern, who later had the brilliant idea to divide that mental age by a kid's actual age, and boom, that's how we got that single famous number, the IQ.
Right around the same time, a psychologist named Charles Spearman came up with this hugely influential theory. He believed in what he called general intelligence, or the G factor. The best way to think about it is like the raw horsepower of your brain, a single core mental energy that powers pretty much everything you do, from solving a tricky math problem to just understanding a complex sentence.
And this quote right here, it really gets to the heart of what Spearman was thinking. For him, this general intelligence wasn't just for taking tests. It was the fundamental tool our minds use to adapt to an ever-changing, complicated world. It's about survival, it's about thriving. But you have to wonder, could one single factor really explain everything? Well, it didn't take long before other scientists started to notice some pretty serious cracks in that G-factor theory.
So the first major challenge came from a researcher named L.L. Thurstone. He looked at all the data and basically said, whoa, hold on a second, it's not one big thing. He argued that intelligence is actually a cluster of different, pretty separate abilities. So, you could be an absolute whiz with numbers but kind of clumsy with words, or the other way around. The whole idea of being smart across the board was starting to look a little shaky.
Thurston actually proposed at least 7 of these primary mental abilities. So all of a sudden, being smart wasn't just one thing anymore. It could mean having amazing verbal comprehension, or lightning-fast perceptual speed, or this incredible ability to visualize things in 3D space. That single number was starting to fracture into many different pieces.
But the real earthquake in intelligence research, that hit in the 1980s. One theory came along that didn't just crack the old definition of smart, it completely blew it apart.
Meet Howard Gardner. He looked at decades of research that was laser-focused on a single G factor and basically said, you guys are thinking way too small. He argued that we don't have one intelligence, or even 7. We have many, and they all operate pretty much independently from each other.
And this right here is his revolutionary model. Gardner basically said that the genius of a poet who's amazing with words is just as valid and real as the genius of a scientist who's a master of logic. He gave us the language to finally describe the intelligence of a great athlete, a brilliant musician, a fantastic teacher, or even a skilled surgeon. He was validating completely different ways of being smart.
I mean, just think about how empowering this was. All of a sudden, you didn't have to be a math genius or a brilliant writer to be considered intelligent. Your unique talents, whether they were in sports or music or simply understanding other people, were finally being recognized as their own special form of genius.
This explosion of what smart could mean brought us to another really key distinction, one that I think we all recognize from our daily lives: the huge difference between book smarts and street smarts.
So a psychologist named Robert Sternberg came along and argued that true success in the real world isn't about just one thing. It's a balance of 3 totally distinct abilities. You've got your analytical intelligence. That's your classic book smarts. Then there's creative intelligence for coming up with new ideas. And finally, practical intelligence, what we all call street smarts. He called the whole thing the triarchic theory of successful intelligence.
Let's really zero in on that last one. Practical intelligence is, well, it's the real-world stuff. It's not about solving abstract problems in a classroom. It's about figuring out how to get things done, how to navigate messy social situations, and just how to adapt to the chaos of everyday life.
This chart just lays out the difference perfectly. Book smarts are for solving problems that someone else gives you, where the rules are clear and there's usually just one right answer. But street smarts, that's about figuring out your own problems out there in the real world, which are almost always messy, poorly defined, and have lots of possible solutions. They really are two completely different ways of thinking.
So, you might be wondering, where does creativity fit into all of this? Is being creative basically the same thing as being intelligent?
Well, not exactly. It's a little more complicated than that. This is what's known as the threshold hypothesis. Research suggests you need a certain baseline level of intelligence. The number that often gets tossed around is an IQ of about 120 to be highly creative. But, and this is the really important part, once you get above that threshold, having a higher IQ doesn't necessarily make you any more creative. They're linked for sure, but they are not the same thing.
And you know, creativity isn't just some magical flash of insight that comes out of nowhere. Psychologists have actually broken it down into a process. It starts with preparation, where you just immerse yourself in a problem. Then comes incubation, where you step away and just let your subconscious chew on it for a while. That often leads to illumination, that's the classic aha moment. And finally, you've got verification, where you actually test and refine your brilliant idea to see if it works in the real world.
So after this whole journey, from a single, simple number to a whole universe of multiple intelligences, from book smarts to street smarts, it's pretty clear the old question, how smart are you, is completely missing the point. The real question, the one that truly matters now, is this: in what unique, incredible, and powerful ways are you smart?